Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl around the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, pray for us. Saint Gabriel, Saint Raphael. The Feast of the Archangels today. Happy Monday. It is September 29th. Good to be with you. Thanks to Vanessa Den Hagarmo for filling in, and of course to my great team back in Irondale, Richard and Deb, for holding down the fort. Greatly appreciated on Friday. Coming up later this week, as I mentioned on the Sunrise Morning Show with Anna Mitchell, I will be heading down to Rome for the start of the Wine and Shrine Pilgrimage. I usually do 2 pilgrimages every October, the first being with the ladies from Women in the New Evangelization. Kelly Walquist, the foundress, is actually on her way here right now, and we'll be going all over Italy, actually. As I was explaining to Annie, we will start on Thursday in Roma, and then we will go up to Firenze, Florence, and then visit Santa Caterina in Siena. Then it's over to stunning Lake Garda for so much to see there, especially the Madonna del Corona Shrine that's on the cover of my book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. And then quickly visit for the day St. Anthony in Padua, and then we wrap up in Venezia in Venice for St. Mark. So it's a busy trip, but it's a great trip, and we have a wonderful spiritual director with us from the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, Father Klockman, who's wonderful. He'll be celebrating Mass, and we have a fun thing, a very beautiful, blessed event going on. Later this week, Kelly is a nonna now, as I was explaining to Annie. She has a new grandson, Giorgio, and he's actually going to be baptized during one of our Masses at St. Peter's with the group. So it's really special. We'll be posting a lot on Facebook, so just to keep you posted as to what's going on. But we will have a wonderful guest host again. Vanessa will fill in, as well as Sherry Brownrigg, 2 radio pros, so you will be in wonderful hands. Okay, coming up today, speaking of wonderful hands, we have great guests today, let me tell you. We are going to be chatting with Kris McGregor, who's a speaker and has a beautiful ministry and a website entitled DiscerningHearts.com. And we're going to be talking about the road to sainthood, and what a great topic. She'll also be discussing a similar topic with my dear sis, Jeanette Williams, for Women of Grace. She'll be taping with Jeanette this week, so that's why we have her in. She's passing through, so whenever we have these great guests, we grab them and sit them down for a radio interview as well. And then very honored to have Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, back with us for 2 segments to talk about the growing opposition to Senator Dick Durbin receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from Cardinal Cupich for his work in immigration. But so many bishops and other concerned Catholics are speaking up because Senator Durbin has been outspoken, to say the least, about his support for abortion and other things that actually go against church teaching. So we'll discuss with His Excellency Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, and that is the first hour of the program. As far as the Archangels, I can't wait to share with you more about them in the second hour, especially a beautiful reflection from Benedict XVI, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Let's take a look at the weather for you and see what's happening. We have swells and high surf from both Imelda and Umberto are expected to bring dangerous marine and rip current conditions to the east coast of Florida and Georgia today, spreading north along much of the east coast of the country, and heavy rainfall north and west of Imelda falling across the coastal Florida area and Georgia into the Carolinas that could cause some isolated flash and urban flooding through tomorrow. So keep that in mind if you're in those affected areas. It's 4 minutes past the hour. We're so glad you're tuned in to Catholic Connection here on EWTN. Of course, it is the Feast of the Archangels. More on those wonderful assistants and intercessors for us in a little bit. But right now, here on EWTN on September 29th, we need to check the news on a Monday. Pope Leo announcing yesterday he will proclaim St. John Henry Newman a Doctor of the Church on November 1st, the Solemnity of All Saints. Catholic News Agency, quoting the Holy Father, as saying, "I will confer the title of Doctor of the Church on St. John Henry Newman, who gave a decisive contribution to the renewal of theology and to understanding Christian doctrine in its development in the context of the Jubilee of the World of Education." That's from the Pope after celebrating Mass for the Jubilee of Catechists in St. Peter's Square over the weekend. And with that proclamation, Newman will become the 38th Doctor of the Catholic Church, joining a select group of saints recognized for their enduring contribution to Catholic theology and spirituality. Newman is especially noted for his insights on the development of doctrine and the role of conscience. A 19th century theologian, he was a much-loved and well-known Anglican priest before entering the Catholic Church way back in 1845. Ordained a Catholic priest 2 years later, he founded the Oratory of St. Philip Neri in England and was created a cardinal by Pope Leo XIII back in 1879. And the Pope, as we mentioned in that story about St. John Henry Newman, did hold a special Jubilee audience in St. Peter's Square over the weekend as thousands of catechists attended the Jubilee of Catechists on September 6th through the 28th. In his message, the Holy Father is saying, God is simple and reveals himself to the simple. He said, for this reason, there is an infallibility of the people of God in believing, of which the infallibility of the Pope is an expression and a service. Pope Leo then turning to 4th century St. Ambrose, who was serving as governor of the city of Milan during a time of great conflict in the church. He said as a civil authority, he intervened at a crucial point in the election of a new bishop, employing his great ability for listening and mediation to bring calm among the faithful. Tradition recounting that a child cried out, Ambrose, bishop, and the whole people joined in that acclamation. Ambrose, he said, was not even baptized. He was only a catechumen, that is, preparing for baptism, yet the people perceived something profound in this man and elected him. Thus, the Pope went on to say the church had one of its greatest bishops and a doctor of the church. Pope Leo marveling at the great gift the little ones can give to the church, saying, even today, this is a grace to ask for to become Christians while living out the vocation we have received. And with the month of October almost here, Pope Leo XIV, as Devin Watkins reports from the Vatican, invites the faithful again to join in praying the rosary every day during next month to invoke God's gift of peace and announce a rosary in St. Peter's Square. He'll be doing that on October 11th, as Watkins explains, as part of the Jubilee of Marian spirituality.
He said the faithful in Rome will gather in St. Peter's Square on October 11th at 6 p.m.
Perciò invito tutti ogni giorno del prossimo mese a pregare il rosario per la pace.
I invite everyone each day of the coming month, he said, to pray the rosary for peace, personally, in the family, and in community. The Pope also invited Vatican employees to pray the rosary daily in St. Peter's Basilica at 7 p.m. throughout October. In his greetings to Portuguese-speaking pilgrims, Pope Leo lamented the ruins wrought by murderous hatred. He invited Christians to share with others the love of Jesus that illumines and lifts up humanity. The Rosary for Peace will be held during the Jubilee of Marian Spirituality, which takes place on October 11th and 12th. That day also marks the 63rd anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council, which Pope St. John XXIII opened on October 11th, 1962. I'm Devin Watkins.
40-year-old Thomas Sanford of Burton, Michigan, to open fire at a Grand Blanc Township church yesterday morning about an hour north of Detroit remains under investigation. The shooting has left at least 4 people dead, 8 others hurt, according to local authorities. Grand Blanc Township Police Chief William Rainey says the FBI is now involved in the investigation.
They're devoting 100 agents to this area because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of witnesses that were within the church, and that is a lot of witness information, statements that we have to obtain.
Sanford was killed by a Grand Blanc Township police officer and a Michigan Department of Natural Resources officer after he crashed his vehicle into the church and then got out of the vehicle shooting with an assault rifle before setting the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on fire. Police finding 3 improvised explosive devices in Sanford's vehicle, and the Michigan State Police bomb squad and SWAT teams also searched his home. The governor says violence anywhere, especially in a place of worship, is unacceptable. And Tammy Trujillo reports authorities are now stepping up patrols near religious institutions, for example in Los Angeles, after that mass shooting at a Mormon church in Michigan.
The shooting on Sunday left 5 people dead, including the shooter. Mayor Karen Bass says the LAPD is increasing patrols around religious institutions out of an abundance of caution. The LA County Sheriff's Department also says it's actively assessing any potential threats and is implementing increased patrol checks to critical facilities. The LASD is also encouraging the reporting of any suspicious activity. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Vice President J.D. Vance says it's time for Russia to come to the table and talk peace. During an appearance on Fox News Sunday, Vance calling on the Russians to wake up and accept reality.
The Russians are killing a lot of people. They're losing a lot of people. They don't have much to show for it. We remain committed to peace, but it takes two to tango. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the Russians have refused to sit down with any bilateral meetings.
The vice president's comments come after President Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelensky at the UN. It marked the 4th time the leaders have met since Trump has returned to office as they took a look for an end to the nation's war with Russia. And President Trump's transportation secretary announcing tighter standards for big rig truckers. Speaking a few days ago, Sean Duffy specifically mentioning a 17-vehicle pileup in Austin that happened in March.
A truck driver failed to brake and crashed into a long line of traffic. They killed 5 people, including 2 children.
The driver was a citizen of Ethiopia who was in the U.S. on a work visa. The arrest report suggesting he had a CDL from a different state and mostly spoke his native language. Duffy says that all states must pause issuing commercial driver's licenses to non-citizens until they can comply with the tough new rules. And Senate Majority Leader John Thune pointing the finger at Democratic lawmakers as the clock is ticking on a government shutdown. In an interview yesterday with Meet the Press on NBC, Thune saying Democrats' demands have brought true negotiation to a stop.
What the Democrats have done here is take the federal government as a hostage, and for that matter, by extension, the American people, to try and get a whole laundry list of things that they want, that special interest groups on the far left are pushing them to accomplish.
Thune will be joining House Speaker Mike Johnson, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer for an Oval Office meeting with the president later today. Congress has just 2 days left to agree on a stopgap bill to keep the government fully funded past tomorrow. Speaking of House Speaker Mike Johnson, he's calling out Democrats as well in terms of their health care demands ahead of a looming government shutdown. Appearing on CNN's State of the Union, Johnson saying the concessions his colleagues across the aisle are looking for are simply absurd.
What they're demanding, they know is outrageous. They know it's far beyond the pale. And look, I challenge anybody listening to us, Jake, go pull this up. You will see there is nothing partisan in what we have passed and presented to the Senate.
His comments come ahead of the president's expected meeting again with top congressional leaders later today. And Mayor Eric Adams is dropping his bid for re-election. In a video message released on social media yesterday afternoon, the mayor saying he's suspending his campaign. He blamed media speculation and the campaign finance board's decision to withhold funds and have undermined his ability to continue. He claims it comes just over 5 weeks before Election Day and leaves a 3-way race between Democratic frontrunners Zohran Mamdani, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, and Republican Curtis Sliwa. It is a Monday morning. We are glad that you are tuned in. And have you had your coffee yet? Well, today is National Coffee Day, so go grab a cup. While most of us have at least 1 cup a day, the origins of one of America's most consumed beverages remain somewhat murky, pun intended. The first known references to brewed coffee come from Yemen in the 15th century, and it wouldn't be introduced to America until the mid-17th century by European traders, but I don't know about you, I'm sure glad it was. It is 13 minutes past the hour. Do hope your Monday is going well. The Feast of the Archangels, pray for us. We'll be right back on a Monday. Stay tuned. Do hope you're having a great day. Congratulations to another EWTN radio partner this morning, KDMI 97.5 FM, serving Canton, Texas, Happy anniversary, celebrating 10 years with us. Congrats to Ken and everyone at St. Therese Catholic Church from your friends here at EWTN. That's a nice anniversary, 10 years. There you go. Catholic radio continues to grow, and we're all blessed by it. Also blessed by our wonderful guest who's going to be passing through the EWTN studios later this week to sit down, of course, with the wonderful Jeanette Williams and Women of Grace to tape a couple of episodes. Kris McGregor is with DiscerningHearts.com. Kris, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on the phone this morning from your studio in Nebraska. Let's talk a little bit, first of all, about Discerning Hearts. I love that title because we're supposed to be discerning as believers, not just once, not just twice, but at least in my opinion, we should be discerning every day to make sure we're still doing God's will. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it is a delight to be with you, Teresa. I have just admired your gift for discerning for so long. I mean, you made that great discernment from listening deeply, and you left secular broadcasting. You dedicated yourself to a time in the church when people weren't doing that, Teresa, and you did it.
Well, it wasn't my original choice. I'm not going to consider myself any type of a hero, because if you would have told me, 25, 30 years ago that I'd be doing Catholic radio and speaking around about pro-life issues and the church teachings on women, I would have said, I don't know what you're smoking or drinking, but I want some of it. But that's how it works when you really start discerning, right? How did you decide to, and discern, pun intended, to start your own ministry, Discerning Hearts?
Well, we had kind of a similar story. My husband, Bruce, and I started out married almost 42 years ago. And we worked in rock radio. As a matter of fact, there was a time when Bruce was at WRIF in Detroit.
I know that radio station very well. Wow.
I bet you do. This was back in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And because we got married, that's where we met in rock radio. But because we got married, they had nepotism policies, at least at that time. And I was out. So I worked at record stores in the area, with big wholesalers and different things. But then when our first daughter came, I fell in love with her, stayed home to take care of her. And by the time we got to Detroit, we had our second child, Katie. And there was a time, because he was so busy, we actually lived in Livonia, and he had to go to Southfield all the time. And
which is, just for our listeners, so they know, because we're national. So Livonia and Southfield are considered like the west side of the suburbs of Detroit. Nice areas, but it can be a trek depending on where your TV station is located, a radio station, right?
The reason I mentioned that, because I was like a lot of moms whose husbands were really busy, and I was home alone with the kids, and I had just lost my beloved grandmother, who had such a love for the rosary. And I was grieving, and one evening, I was dialing around on the cable looking for something, and I saw this young girl praying in a field. And I thought, what is she doing? And she was praying the rosary. And I sat and I listened. I cried. And when it was all done, there came a program with a woman named Angelica, a nun, Mother Angelica, who looked so much like my grandmother. And I listened to her, and I learned, and it was so consoling, and I was healing. And it changed my life and my family, Teresa. I know she had really touched your life as well, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But how do you go from a stay-at-home mom, not sure what you're going to do, not sure about what you're going to do, and if you're going to go back into broadcasting, which is a crazy business, as we both know, and then to start this ministry?
Well, what happened is we ended up moving back, because we had really gotten back into our faith at that time. We moved back to Omaha because we wanted to settle down a little bit more. Bruce continued being the operations manager at big rock stations, but even he was starting to have this activity of grace in his life, and he helped to start the foundations would become Spirit Catholic Radio. At that same time, I was working in parishes. I had gone back to school, studied theology, became a DRE, director of liturgy. So long story short, by 2000, we ended up, Bruce told me one night, it was rather monumental, I'm tired of chasing ratings. I want to do something good for God. Mm-hmm. Probably not unlike maybe something that tweaked your heart as well.
Oh, yeah.
And decided to join Spirit Catholic Radio, left the big lucrative secular broadcasting job, and started to form this little seed that became this huge network of stations in the Midwest. But we always wanted to work together again, and so we started a morning show on the radio. And because of the background that I had, this was unexpected, but because of the background I had in parish life and theology, we were able to kind of put this show together, and it complemented one another. But it got a little frustrating for me anyway after about 5 years, because I always wanted to go deeper. I always wanted to do more series programs. And so essentially there came a time about 5 years after that, 2010 actually, where I just wanted to produce spiritual formation programs to help people go deeper. We did them for some radio stations, but then I decided to put them on iTunes, okay, back then when it was called iTunes, and so that people could upload them to wherever their station is. But what surprised and shocked me, Teresa, was that I was getting feedback and things from people around the world that were connecting with this material that I never thought was going to become something that everybody would universally call now podcasting.
Wow.
And so that's how that happened.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing? And this is why, Discerning Hearts is so important, because the discernment, when you're going through something, and you and your husband know this, being fellow broadcasters, you think it's for what you're doing then. Like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. This is my life. Not knowing that everything we do is an experience that God's going to use somehow, probably later down the road.
That's it. I mean, and you deal with this every day on your show, and all of the work that you do. A discerning heart, you have to learn how to listen deeply, right? Mm-hmm. You got to notice what draws us to Christ, what pulls us away. But there's so much noise. First, how do you get there? How do you learn how to listen? But then also, what is it you're hearing? And what is truth? What is a lie? What hits the wounds of your own? I know I went through this, that speaks into pain and will draw me away from who wants to heal me. The world is really struggling with that right now, isn't it?
Don't you think, though, and absolutely it is, but don't you think with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I just saw another survey showing that there's an additional increase. The pastors, are both Catholic, Protestant, continue to see an increase in interest in church, and church attendance is growing. I think people are opening themselves up more now. Don't you think, right now, this time?
God never wastes an opportunity of grace. And this is one of those moments where we have them, don't we, culturally, mm-hmm. whether it's on a large scale like this, where it just everybody is aware, they want to know more. But it also happens in the smaller moments, when someone, like when my grandmother died, right. Or when we find out we've lost a job and we don't understand why. Or someone, unfortunately, maybe there's a relationship that totally falls apart and you're struggling with your identity. It happens in the individual moments, and God is always there, always waiting. He's always present, but the lie is oftentimes people, they don't think he is. Yeah. And that's why we have to reach out, but by witnessing, by offering, by being present, and always ready to communicate the love that he wants to share with others.
Yeah. And always discerning, and that's why your ministry is so important. We've been chatting with Kris McGregor. I can't believe, well, yes, I can. You get two broadcasters together and the time flies. Kris McGregor, discerninghearts.com, and she's going to be taping this week with Jeanette Williams here at EWTN in Irondale. I can't wait for those programs, Kris. We have to have you back on. I have a million questions. We have to just chat about Detroit radio and the craziness of the business. Oh, my goodness, we have so much in common. Kris, it's been a delight, my dear. So discerninghearts.com, and you're coming in and you're taping later this week at EWTN, right?
I can't wait. And I hope one day to be able to meet you personally. You've been such a role model for Catholic women in media.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your faithfulness.
You too. I can't wait to talk to you again. Kris McGregor, discerninghearts.com, taping with Jeanette later this week. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. Feast of the Archangels, 28 minutes past the hour. Great to have a wonderful bishop who's so steadfast in his teaching, his clarity. Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois. And if you've been following the story, we've been talking about it here. We have Bill Donahue from the Catholic League talking about this last week. And of course, our news outlets, Catholic News Agency, The Register, EWTN News Nightly have all been covering this as well. There is now growing opposition to Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from Cardinal Cupich coming up next month. Bishop Paprocki, we were chatting during the break, so we know that more bishops are joining you in your efforts to, speak the truth in love and to remind His Eminence how confusing this can be for people. Have there been any new developments in the story? And thanks for joining us.
Well, unfortunately, no. It's pretty clear that the Archdiocese of Chicago intends to go through with giving this Lifetime Achievement Award to Senator Dick Durbin, despite his consistent, persistent, and obstinate pro-abortion stance. And what has been a good development is a number of other bishops across the United States have weighed in and expressed their support for the call to not give this award to Senator Durbin. And I appreciate that, because this is really something that does affect the whole United States. It's not just an issue between Cardinal Cupich and myself, Bishop Paprocki. It started here because Senator Durbin has his home here in Springfield, and he's been told more than 20 years ago by his pastor, then Monsignor Kevin Van, now Bishop Kevin Van of Orange, California, not to go to communion, this back in 2004, and that was upheld by my predecessor, Bishop George Lucas, now the Archbishop Emeritus of Omaha. So this is nothing new, and so when this announcement was made about the Lifetime Achievement Award, of course, I was contacted by the media as the bishop of Senator Durbin's home diocese, but it really affects all of us, because also back in 2004, it was the United States Conference of Bishops that adopted the Statement on Catholics and Political Life, and made it very clear that that politicians should not be given awards if they are contradict Catholic teaching. They shouldn't be given places of honor or speaking engagements and things like that. And so this is contradicting the policy of the bishops of the United States. So I think every bishop of the United States has a stake in this and has an interest in making sure that that policy is followed.
Absolutely. Talking with Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, the thing that's so frustrating is that this is if people are not familiar, or even if they are all familiar with church teaching, I'm sure most Catholics, even if they're not all that faithful, understand what the church teaches about abortion. Then you see someone like him, and he's very outspoken in terms of, and has been for years, as you well know, in his support of abortion. I mean, and he believes in all the, not that all abortion is extreme, but he really believes in all the extremes in abortion. And then he receives an award, and it seems to, at least, affirm that it's okay to pick and choose, be a cafeteria Catholic.
Yes, and that really is what I'm talking about here when I say not a statement that I released that this giving this Lifetime Achievement Award to Senator Durbin risks causing grave scandal. And scandal, in two senses of that word. One is the kind of the more popular notion of scandal. We think of something shocking, and this is shocking. That's what I said. I was shocked to learn about the Archdiocese of Chicago giving this award. But it's also scandal in the more technical sense. A scandal is something that leads other people to think that something is okay to do, something that it is wrong, that they think it's all right. And so then that's the problem here, because you've got someone who's been pro-abortion throughout most of his political career, not all of his political career. He actually started as a pro-life Democrat here in central Illinois, and then he flipped some years ago. And but for well over 20 years, he's been pro-abortion, and so he's getting this acknowledgement from the Archdiocese of Chicago, and it would lead other pro-abortion politicians to say, well, if he's been pro-abortion all these years and he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Catholic Church, well, it must be okay. I guess I can vote pro-abortion too. So it's scandalous in that sense.
Yeah, and that's the thing, coming from the Catholic Church. And we're talking about abortion, which is always intrinsically evil. And the bishops have even come out with statement after statement, even in the last election, calling it the preeminent issue.
Yes, and preeminent in the sense it's not the only issue, but it is the most important issue in terms of the protection of human life from conception to natural death. And that's why I really regret to see that there are some who are trying to defend this giving of a Lifetime Achievement Award to Senator Durbin by invoking Cardinal Bernardine's consistent ethic of life. And this is totally exactly contrary to what Cardinal Bernardine said about that. And I quote his own words. He was interviewed in the National Catholic Register in 1988, and he said, quote, "I know that some people on the left, if I may use that label, have used the consistent ethic to give the impression that the abortion issue is not at all that important anymore, that you should be against abortion in a general way, but there are more important issues. So don't hold anybody's feet to the fire just on abortion. That's a misuse of the consistent ethic, and I deplore it," end of quote. So, I mean, that's very strong language. He says his consistent ethic is being misused by those who will kind of downplay the abortion issue, and he deplored that misuse. And so that's basically what's happening here. You've got people saying, well, Senator Durbin, he's been doing a lot of good things for people and social issues, and that's true. But the one issue that is preeminent is abortion, and he has not been promoting the respect for unborn human beings. And I would say it's sort of like someone saying, well, this person is a good Catholic because he or she follows 9 out of the 10 commandments. It's just that one commandment about thou shalt not kill. Well, but that's only one commandment. The rest is wrong. But it's wonderful that these people are following the other commandments. Well, you can't do that and say, well, you're following 9 out of 10 commandments, and therefore that makes you somebody that should get a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Wow. Talking with Bishop Thomas Paprocki of the Springfield, Illinois Diocese about growing opposition to Senator Dick Durbin receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Archdiocese of Chicago and His Eminence Cardinal Cupich. And this is in relationship to the issue of immigration. But as you heard Bishop Paprocki say, we're talking about the evils of abortion, which top everything else, right? It's a preeminent issue. When we come back, Your Excellency, I do want to talk about the response from His Eminence Cardinal Cupich, where he said that this is part of his effort to reach out to Senator Durbin. I'm paraphrasing that, but at the end of the day, reaching out, yes, okay, fine. I mean, look at how Archbishop Cordileone has tried over the years to reach out to Nancy Pelosi, and unfortunately, she didn't respond to any of his requests to sit down and talk with him. That's one thing to try to reach out to them, but it's a whole different ballgame. It's a much bigger issue to give them an award, making it very public. And the thing that's frustrating to me as a media person, the media are going to eat this up and put this out there because they love Senator Durbin because of his positions on abortion and other issues. So this is going to be something that the media are going to have a field day with as well, which is going to add to the confusion. We'll have more conversation with Bishop Thomas Paprocki, Springfield, Illinois Diocese, on the growing opposition to Senator Durbin receiving Lifetime Achievement Award. And of course, Catholic News Agency has this story as well. We will be right back. It's almost 37 minutes past the hour. Stay tuned. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Blessed to have Bishop Paprocki from Springfield with us this morning, a wonderful teacher and leader. Your Excellency, it is frustrating, especially for those of us who are out there and who have a platform and are trying to preach the truth and love as you do. And it's one thing, I get it, you want to reach out to Catholic politicians as leaders of the church who are not paying attention to the church teaching and sit down with them, as Archbishop Cordileone has tried to do with Pelosi, and you've tried to do over the years with not only Durbin, with others. But it's one thing to reach out, another to give them an award, a very public award, that will probably, as I said before the break, receive a lot of attention. What are your thoughts as we continue the conversation?
Well, I agree that dialogue is very important, and we should talk to politicians and everybody that really wants to live in conformity with Catholic teaching, and if they're not, to have some conversation with them about that. And that conversation, that kind of dialogue has been going on with Senator Durbin, as I said, for well over 20 years. I know that was a conversation with then Monsignor Kevin Van with him personally about that. And then when I was appointed bishop here in Springfield in 2010, I had lunch with Senator Durbin, and he brought that up about the fact that since 2004 he was not permitted to go to communion in this diocese, and he was kind of hoping, I think, as the new kid on the block, that maybe I would change that and allow him to start going to communion again. And I asked him then about his position on abortion, and he made it clear that that had not changed. So I said, well, then I can't change that policy, if you haven't changed your position. So it was clear that despite the dialogue, that he was going to be obstinate about that. And so I think at some point you have to say, well, dialogue goes only so far, and if the other person, the dialogue is a two-way street, and if the other person isn't responding to the dialogue, well, you have to then take some action. And so I would describe the approach of just constant talking without taking any action as sort of like appeasement. It's kind of an appeasement approach. Say, well, let's just be nice to them, and maybe if we're nice to them, they'll come around. Well, I think they take that as weakness, and if you're just going to be nice and not have any consequences for doing things that are wrong, they just say, well, look, it doesn't matter. I can do this, and there are no adverse consequences.
Did he think you were going to all of a sudden change your mind on a core teaching of the church as a bishop? I mean, did he not look at your record before he met with you and had his dialogue with you? I mean, come on.
Yeah. And the church has been very, very clear on this. And, it's also clear that I think politicians are making a political calculus. And if they want to do that, that's their freedom. We have freedom to make these choices ever since, Adam and Eve. God gave us the freedom to either follow what he asks us to do or not follow. So if he doesn't want to follow church teaching, that's fine. But then don't say that you're following church teaching, and certainly then some others shouldn't be giving recognitions and honors for someone lifetime achievement when the lifetime record indicates that this person has a position that is gravely inimical to Catholic teaching.
Talking again with Bishop Thomas Paprocki from Springfield, Illinois, regarding the growing opposition to Senator Dick Durbin's receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award for immigration, his involvement in the immigration issue from the Archdiocese of Chicago, expected to happen in November. And this is something I struggle with a lot in terms of the issue of immigration. It seems to have become, I know it's a very, very important issue, and then we have to care for the widow and the orphan and the immigrant, but this has seemed to trump the abortion issue for some in church leadership, or am I taking that incorrectly? Because to me, that seems to be everything now from certain church leaders, and abortion has been pushed to the background further.
No, I agree with you on that. There are other important issues. I mean, the social teaching of the church addresses a spectrum of issues, and so yes, we are concerned for the poor, we are concerned for the immigrant and the migrant. I mean, that goes back to the Old Testament, where many times there are references to the obligation to care for the widow, the orphan, and the alien, kind of put in those categories of people who need special attention. And then you have the fact that the people of Israel were exiles in Egypt, slaves for so many years, and then the Holy Family themselves, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, had to go to Egypt when they were facing persecution in their homeland and what we now call the Holy Land, and so there is this kind of natural disposition to want to help people. I did that myself as a young priest. I went to law school, got a law degree, and I co-founded a legal clinic, the Chicago Legal Clinic, and we were doing immigration services. It was my specialty of providing immigration law for people, but the whole point there was we were doing it legally to try to get people into the country, would get them visas and become U.S. citizens. And so, there are different ways in that regard, and so reasonable people can disagree on what's the best way to help the poor. Is it through government handouts? Is it through trying to create jobs? And that's where political differences come in, and the same thing with immigrants. I mean, our immigration system, frankly, I think is broken and does need to be fixed, but those are in many ways prudential judgments about
I was just going to say it's prudential judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas when you're talking about abortion, you're talking about an intrinsic evil. There's no question. There's not a prudential judgment about whether abortion is murder or not. It's clearly the taking of an innocent human life, and that's always wrong, as was made very clear by Pope John Paul II in his document, Evangelium Vitae, on the Gospel of Life, where he said very clearly that abortion is murder. And even the Second Vatican Council described abortion as an abominable crime. So, I mean, that's very strong language. Pope Francis himself, many times, he used this analogy of abortion as like hiring a hitman, to kill someone that is in your way or you want to get rid of. And so very strong language on the part of the church that I think raises the whole abortion question to a different level than talking about what are the prudential judgments about the best way to help the poor and migrants.
This is what's such a key point, is you have a prudential judgment when it comes to the immigration issue. We do need to help, as you said, but there are ways, and we can agree on this or disagree. You can't disagree on the abortion issue. It has always been, always will be intrinsically evil. And so when you have someone receiving this prominent of an award, someone as prominent as a United States Senator, it causes, again, scandal and confusion. So that's why I really appreciate, at least as a talk show host of the platform, where we try to, of course, here in EWTN, all of our hosts trying to continue to educate all of us on the faith so we know that how to be faithful to the church teachings. Now, I'm sure you'll be issuing another statement if they go through. It sounds like they are going to go through with the award come November. I'm sure you'll be issuing another statement. Will you not? I'm sure you will.
Well, yes. I mean, we'll have to see how this develops. Yeah. I mean, I'm still praying and hoping for a decision on the part of the Archdiocese and Cardinal Cupich to rescind the award. I know a lot of people are writing about this and are very upset. I would also hope and pray that if the Archdiocese doesn't do that, perhaps Senator Durbin himself would see that this award is causing a lot of division, and that he would voluntarily simply withdraw his name and say, I just, for the sake of unity and avoiding the division over this, I withdraw my name. But I don't know what's going to happen in that regard, so we have to kind of see how this plays out.
Yeah. Well, Bill Donahue was on Catholic Connection with me last week, Your Excellency. He said they did reach out via a letter to the senator, but he hasn't heard back from him yet. I'm not holding my breath, with all due respect. But it is important for us to speak up, and we can respectfully reach out to His Eminence Cardinal Cupich and write, even if we're not living within the Archdiocese of Chicago, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely, because as I was saying earlier, it's a national policy. It's the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops on Catholics in the political life, and so it does have national ramifications. And I think people should feel free to reach out and to write. I mean, we have freedom of expression also in canon law, that we should make our opinions known to church leaders. But I would also urge people to do so in a respectful way.
Absolutely.
So not to write with any kind of insulting or harsh language, but to just make it clear, just the truth of the Church's teaching about respect for human life from conception to natural death, and be very respectful in making that position known, and that request and the prayer for that to be followed.
And also, I think in conversation with people, because we all know it's going to continue as we get closer to the date when he's scheduled to receive the award in early November, that those who are kind of on the fence on these issues, especially the most important issue of abortion, well, see, here's Senator Durbin, he's getting a big award, and so how bad could abortion be? And he's really pro-abortion. We respond with love and respect, but with firmness, and no, this is the church teaching, and we have to we have to remind them of that kindly.
Yes, and we have to recognize it for what it is. I mean, unfortunately, some people think that abortion is just removing some unwanted tissue, but we know that it's not. It's not just a tissue. It's a live human being, and that's one of the beautiful things about a lot of our pregnancy help centers, where they have ultrasound machines, and you'll have a pregnant mother come in, and she's at the abortion clinic and just about ready to have the abortion, and then have an ultrasound and see an image of it. This is not just a blob of tissue. This is a human being, and there's there's a head and there's fingers and there's hands and feet, and and they realize, oh no, this really is a baby, and so that's the realization that all people need to come to, that abortion is not just some kind of we're getting rid of something that's inconvenient. We're talking about respect for a real human being here.
But I would say most people nowadays, if they try to claim they don't know that, I'm sorry, but I'm just a little bit cynical, but I wouldn't think that they would be that ignorant that they could actually think it wouldn't be a baby. Not to mention the language, Your Excellency. How many times have you ever heard someone saying, I'm having a clump of cells shower? No, they say a baby shower for a particular purpose, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Well, we're so grateful for you, Your Excellency. You do such a good job in clear teaching, and thank you for that. And you're so calm, which I'm not always calm, but I know I can turn to people like you to lead us. Any final thoughts for those who, I know we get very, very frustrated with this, and we just kind of say, oh, please, not again. What can we do you think, in addition to, obviously, respectfully writing, reaching out? What else do you suggest for the Catholics listening this morning?
Well, I think that it's important for us not to lose hope, and we are in the Jubilee year. We're pilgrims of hope, and so we are surrounded with lots of things that are very disturbing. We in terms of war going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine, and the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk and school shootings and things like that could get us very discouraged. But it's important to realize that this is nothing new. We go back to the first human beings, Adam and Eve, and the son of the first human beings, Cain, killed his brother, and so there's been violence in humanity from the very beginning. But we can't be defined by that. We're not defined by the violence. And that's where Jesus Christ comes in, and his example to show us the way of peace. He is the Prince of Peace. The Blessed Mother is the Queen of Peace, and we need to look to them, to their example, and then and that's what we're called to follow. That if we as Christians, I think, have to give the example of being people that are peaceful and that want to live in harmony, and that we really want to overcome any culture of violence that we have in our society and in the world.
You're a gift, Your Excellency. Thank you. Stay strong, and we will pray for you. Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, discussing the growing opposition to Senator Dick Durbin from his diocese receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from Cardinal Cupich in the Archdiocese of Chicago. We'll be right back. A blessed Monday morning, the Feast of the Archangels, coming up in the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra on a Monday, September 29th, sharing some amazing reflections from the late Benedict XVI, one of my favorite church leaders of all time. I just loved him so much. I just always thought he was so clear, and I swear every time I open my Magnificat, which is where this reflection is from, I can tell it's Benedict. I just say it's Benedict XVI again. Anyway, his reflection, if you have your Magnificat and haven't done your readings yet, grab it because it is beautiful. And then we'll talk a little bit, too, about the archangels, a little bit of background about them. There's another beautiful summary in the Magnificat. Coming up in the second hour of Catholic Connection, in addition to our 2 cents segment where we'll discuss our feast day today, the archangels, we're going to be talking about God's providence in caregiving. And this is going to be interesting. This is a very, very important topic. She is our guest, Lisa. Lisa Livezey is going to be on campus this week, and she's going to be taping with our friends at Home with Jim and Joy, of course, Jim and Joy Pinto. And it's scheduled to air on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. Now, caregiving is a huge, huge issue. Lisa is a wife, a mom, and a grandmother. She volunteers in church and civic settings, and she's learned a lot about this topic. So we're going to be discussing it with her, and I'm sure it's something to which we can all relate, depending on where we are in our lives and the people with whom we're living and caring for, which we all have to do as, of course, brothers and sisters in Christ. Thanks for tuning in to Catholic Connection, and look forward to, hopefully, you joining us, I should say, in the second hour on EWTN Radio Extra. We'll be right back on a Monday. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Hope your Monday is going well. It's hour number 2 of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Great to be with you on a Monday, September 29th, the Feast of the Archangels, St. Michael, St. Gabriel, and St. Raphael. We will talk more about them in our 2 cent segment. If you haven't read, as I said earlier, if you were tuning in on the first hour of the program, if you haven't done your reading yet, and if you use the Magnificat, as I do every single day, along with Deacon Don, we also use the Word Among Us. But today, in the Magnificat, we have a real treat. We have the reflection from the one, the only Benedict XVI. Now, I don't know about you, but I always found, in addition, of course, to John Paul II, I always found Benedict to be so clear. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because I covered and attended several events. I had the opportunity to be at several events with him when he was speaking and was chosen for a women's conference that I went to in Rome many years ago. And I was at an audience with him, but I just felt a connection with Pope Benedict. And the clarity of his teaching was always and still is such a help to me as someone who is responsible for 2 hours of Catholic radio content 5 days a week, and someone who speaks and writes for a living on the Catholic faith. And he just warms my heart, and he is so brilliant, extremely, of course, we know, well-educated, just an incredible teacher and just theologian and phenomenal. And yet when he writes, he speaks with such love and simplicity, as he did today, the reflection of the late Pope Benedict XVI on the archangels and how important they are to us and how scriptural they are, by the way. So we shall discuss coming up in our 2 cents segment, so I think you'll look forward to that, and you can go back and read it again. I always like to read the reflections twice if I get a chance because it sinks in. You know, I have a hard head. I'm Testadora, half Calabrese, half Napolitan. So my father used to say the hard head. The testador is a word for hard head, people from Calabria. And then we're going to talk about the importance of caregiving, God's providence in that very important issue. Lisa Livezey is going to be in studio later this week with our friends at Home with Jim and Joy. The lovely Pintos are going to be hosting her on the program. And then she will be on a little bit later this week on television. So we will dive into this topic of caregiving on a number of different levels. I know for me it was a big issue because my husband and I were taking care of my mom before she passed away. I can't believe Rosie Posey has been gone for 5 years. And those decisions in terms of whether it's an elderly person or a younger person or someone of middle age or spouse, whomever, those are very, very difficult decisions that we have to make. And it can be heartbreaking because it is so labor intensive often. And even if you're not doing the caregiving, if you're hiring someone to help you with the caregiving, it's labor intensive because it takes a lot of research and a lot of time and a lot of love. So we'll discuss and other issues, of course, with Lisa. And she is a writer, contributed to many good publications, including our own National Catholic Register, and she joins us this morning for 2 segments. All right, let's take a look at the weather. It looks like you could get some rain if you're in a particular part of the country, actually 2 parts of the country. We have some swells and high surf from both Imelda and Umberto that are bringing dangerous marine and rip current conditions to the east coast of Florida and Georgia today. So the east coast could be hit also a little bit later in the week. We have heavy rainfall northwest of Imelda falling across Florida, again in Georgia, into the Carolinas. That could cause isolated flash and urban flooding through tomorrow. So right now, today, we're looking at Florida, Georgia, those 2 areas I mentioned. Then it's going to be moving up the coast a little bit later in the week, beginning probably sometime later tomorrow. So keep that in mind if you're in those affected areas. In the meantime, it is almost 4 minutes past the hour. Actually, it is 4 minutes past the hour on a Monday morning, September 29th, the Feast of the Archangels. Let's get started with the news here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Pope Leo XIV announcing on Sunday that he will proclaim St. John Henry Newman a Doctor of the Church, coming up on November 1st, of course, the Solemnity of All Saints. He says, I will confer the title of Doctor of the Church on St. John Henry Newman, who gave a decisive contribution to the renewal of theology and to understanding Christian doctrine in its development in the context of the Jubilee of the World of Education. The Pope said this after celebrating Mass for the Jubilee of Catechists in St. Peter's Square. With that proclamation, Newman will become the 38th doctor of the church, joining a select group of saints recognized, of course, for their enduring contributions to Catholic theology and spirituality. He's especially noted for his insights on the development of doctrine and the role of conscience. A 19th century English theologian, Newman was first known as an Anglican priest before entering the Catholic Church back in 1845, ordained a Catholic priest some 2 years later, and then founding the Oratory of St. Philip Neri in his homeland of England, and was created a cardinal by Pope Leo XIII back in 1879. Pope Leo XIV holding a special Jubilee audience in St. Peter's Square over the weekend as thousands of catechists attended the Jubilee of Catechists on September 26th, with that conference wrapping up yesterday, the 28th. In his catechesis, the Holy Father said, God is simple and reveals himself to the simple, adding, for this reason, there is an infallibility of the people of God in believing, of which that infallibility of the Pope is an expression and a service. He then turned to the 4th century saint, St. Ambrose, who was serving as governor of the city of Milan, he said, during a time of great conflict in the church. As a civil authority, Pope Leo said he intervened at a crucial point in the election of a new bishop of Milan, employing his great ability for listening and mediation to bring calm among the faithful. And tradition, he said, recounts that a child cried out, "Ambrose, bishop," and the whole people joined in the acclamation. Ambrose, he added, was not even baptized. He was a catechumen, that is, preparing for baptism. The Pope went on to say, yet the people perceived something profound in this man and then elected him. Thus the Church, Pope Leo added, had one of its greatest bishops and a doctor of the Church. The Pope also marveled at the great gift that the little ones give to the Catholic Church, saying, even today, this is a grace to ask for, to become Christians, while living out the vocation we have received. And with the month of October almost upon us, the Pope is, as Devin Watkins tells us in reports from the Vatican, inviting the faithful to join in praying the Rosary every day during the month of October to invoke God's gift of peace and announce a Rosary in St. Peter's Square on October 11th as part of the Jubilee of Marian spirituality.
The faithful in Rome will gather in St. Peter's Square on October 11th at 6 p.m.
Perciò invito tutti ogni giorno del prossimo mese a pregare il rosario per la pace.
I invite everyone each day of the coming month, he said, to pray the Rosary for peace, personally, in the family, and in community. The Pope also invited Vatican employees to pray the Rosary daily in St. Peter's Basilica at 7 p.m. throughout October. In his greetings to Portuguese-speaking pilgrims, Pope Leo lamented the ruins wrought by murderous hatred. He invited Christians to share with others the love of Jesus that illumines and lifts up humanity. The Rosary for Peace will be held during the Jubilee of Marian Spirituality, which takes place on October 11th and 12th. That day also marks the 63rd anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council, which Pope St. John XXIII opened on October 11th, 1962. I'm Devin Watkins.
Exactly what prompted 40-year-old Thomas Sanford of Burton, Michigan, to open fire on people at a Grand Blanc Township church north of Detroit Sunday morning remains under investigation. The shooting leaving at least 5 people dead, including the gunman, and 8 others hurt, according to local authorities. Grand Blanc Township Police Chief William Rainey says the FBI is now involved in their investigation.
They're devoting 100 agents to this area because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of witnesses that were within the church, and that is a lot of witness information, statements that we have to obtain.
Sanford was killed by a Grand Blanc Township officer and a Michigan Department of Natural Resources officer after he crashed the vehicle, the church's vehicle, and then got out shooting with an assault rifle before setting the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on fire. Police found 3 improvised explosive devices in his car, and the Michigan State Police bomb squad and SWAT teams also searched his home. The governor says violence anywhere, especially in a place of worship, is unacceptable. Meanwhile, Tammy Trujillo tells us authorities are now stepping up patrols near religious institutions in Los Angeles after that mass shooting at a Mormon church in Michigan.
The shooting on Sunday left 5 people dead, including the shooter. Mayor Karen Bass says the LAPD is increasing patrols around religious institutions out of an abundance of caution. The LA County Sheriff's Department also says it's actively assessing any potential threats and is implementing increased patrol checks to critical facilities. The LASD is also encouraging the reporting of any suspicious activity. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Vice President J.D. Vance, in other news, says it's time for Russia to come to the table and talk peace. During an appearance on Fox News Sunday, he called on the Russians to wake up and accept reality.
The Russians are killing a lot of people. They're losing a lot of people. They don't have much to show for it. We remain committed to peace, but it takes two to tango. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the Russians have refused to sit down with any bilateral meetings.
The vice president's comments came after President Trump met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky at the UN. It marked the fourth time those leaders have met since Trump has returned to office as they look for an end to the nation's war with Russia. And President Trump's transportation secretary announcing tighter standards for big truckers. Speaking on Friday, Sean Duffy specifically mentioning a 17-vehicle pileup in Austin that happened in March.
A truck driver failed to brake and crashed into a long line of traffic. They killed 5 people, including 2 children.
The driver, a citizen of Ethiopia, he was in the U.S. on a work visa. The arrest report suggested he had a CDL from a different state and mostly spoke his native language. Duffy said that all states must pause issuing the CDLs or commercial driver's licenses to non-citizens until they can comply with the tough new rules. Senate Majority Leader John Thune pointing the finger at Democratic lawmakers as the clock ticks on a government shutdown. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Thune saying Democrats' demands have brought the true negotiations to a stop.
What the Democrats have done here is take the federal government as a hostage, and for that matter, by extension, the American people, to try and get a whole laundry list of things that they want that special interest groups on the far left are pushing them to accomplish.
Thune will join House Speaker Mike Johnson, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer for an Oval Office meeting with the president later today. Congress has just 2 days left to agree on a stoppage or a stopgap bill to keep the government fully funded past Tuesday. And Mayor Eric Adams is dropping his bid for re-election. In a video message released on social media yesterday, the mayor said he's suspending his campaign. He blamed media speculation and the Campaign Finance Board's decision to withhold funds that have, he says, undermined his ability to continue. This after over 5 weeks before Election Day, and it also leaves now a 3-way race between Democratic frontrunner Zohran Mamdani, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, and Republican Curtis Sliwa. Tropical storm Imelda, as we mentioned in the weather forecast, expected to become a hurricane by late today or tomorrow after moving across the Bahamas. The National Hurricane Center says the system is expected to move away from the southeastern part of the country, but rainfall totals of up to 6 inches could be likely in parts of the coastal Carolinas. Again, we mentioned that a few minutes ago if you're just tuning in our weather forecast. There's a tropical storm watch already in effect for the east coast of Florida, and forecasters are also warning of life-threatening surf and rip current conditions along much of the East Coast early this week. And last but not least, as we wrap up our newscast on a Monday morning, hey, today is National Coffee Day. I love coffee. Well, most of us have at least 1 cup a day. The origins of one of America's most consumed beverages remains somewhat murky, pun intended. The first known references to brewed coffee are from Yemen in the 15th century, and it wouldn't come here to the US of A until the mid-17th century by European traders. Today, most of the coffee we drink comes from Brazil and Colombia. It's all good, including Italian coffee as well, just saying. We'll be right back on a Monday. We're so glad you're listening. It's the second hour of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Today is the Feast of the Archangels. Beautiful feast day in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. 3 archangels are named in Scripture. Michael, a defender of the church, Gabriel, the herald of the incarnation, and Raphael, whose name means God heals. In chapters 5 through 12 of the book of Tobit, Raphael accompanies young Tobiah on the journey that ends in his marriage to Sarah. With Raphael's aid, the evil spirits troubling Sarah are defeated, and Tobit's blindness is miraculously healed. Travelers, migrants, and those in search of a spouse seek Raphael's intercession. In Tuscany and elsewhere, and this is very interesting, in Italy, parents pray to Raphael as a defender of adolescent charity or chastity as young people leave home for the first time. Saints Gabriel, Michael, and Raphael, pray for us on this, the feast of these three saints, the archangels. All right, so I want to share with you first this beautiful reading, our first reading for today, from the book of the prophet Daniel. As I watched, thrones were set up, and the Ancient One took his throne. His clothing was bright as snow, and the hair on his head as white as wool. His throne was flames of fire, with wheels of burning fire. A surging stream of fire flowed out from where he sat. Thousands upon thousands were ministering to him, and myriads upon myriads attended him. The court was convened, and the books were opened. As the visions during the night continued, I saw one like the Son of Man, a Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him, he received dominions, glory, and kingship. Nations and peoples of every language serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. His kingship shall not be destroyed. The word of the Lord. That's our first reading. Now, the gospel for today comes from the Gospel of St. John, where we see Jesus talking about the angels, right? When he's meeting with Nathanael, and Nathanael is saying, well, how do you know that I'm faithful? And they have this conversation about him sitting under the fig tree. And Jesus says to him, I don't have time to read the whole Gospel, I told you that I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than this. And he said to him, Amen, amen, I say to you, you will see heaven open up and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So when we talk about the angels, brothers and sisters, we're not just talking about some cute figurines or some cute images of these adorable little cherubs sitting on clouds or looking up, to the sky. We are talking about angels that are in Scripture, that God tells us angels exist. And even in the second reading today, before the Gospel, in the book of Revelation, from chapter 12, war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels battled against the dragon. The dragon and its angels fought back, but they did not prevail, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. So Michael is mentioned more than once in Scripture, but there it is, right there in the book of Revelation. So as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to share this beautiful reflection of the amazing and late Pope Benedict XVI. His meditation, the meditation of the day, the Magnificat, comes from him, and it's all about the archangels. He says, the angel is a creature who stands before God, oriented to God with his whole being. All three names, and this is interesting, listen very carefully to this. All three names of the archangels end with the word El. Raphael, of course, Michael, Gabriel, which means God. God, Benedict says, is inscribed in their names, in their nature. Their true nature is existing in his sight, and for him they are God's messengers. They bring God to men. They open heaven, and thus open earth. The angels speak to man of what constitutes his true being, of what in his life is so often concealed and buried. They bring him back to himself, touching him on God's behalf. Benedict XVI goes on to say, all this becomes even clearer if we now look at the figures of the three archangels whose feast the Church is celebrating today. First, Benedict says, of all, there is Michael. He defends the cause of God's oneness against the presumption of the dragon, the ancient serpent, as John calls it. The serpent's continuous effort is to make men believe that God must disappear so that they themselves may become important, that God impedes our freedom, and therefore that we must rid ourselves of him. Gabriel, he says, is a messenger of God's incarnation. He knocks at Mary's door, and through him, God himself asks Mary for her yes to the proposal to become the mother of the Redeemer, of giving her human flesh to the eternal Word of God. The Lord knocks again and again, Benedict says, at the door of the human heart. In the book of Revelation, he says to the angel of the church of Laodicea, and through him to the people of all times, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. The Lord is at the door. at the door of the world, at the door of every individual heart. He knocks to be let in. The incarnation of God, his taking flesh, must continue until the end of time. Today, too, Pope Benedict says he needs people who, so to speak, make their own flesh available to him. And last but not least, St. Raphael, Pope Benedict says, is presented to us about all in the book of Tobit as the angel. To him is entrusted the task of healing. When Jesus sends his disciples out on a mission, the task of proclaiming the gospel is always linked with that of healing. The Good Samaritan, in accepting and healing the injured person lying by the wayside, becomes, without words, a witness of God's love. We are all this injured man in need of being healed. Proclaiming the gospel already means healing in itself, because man is in need of truth and love above all things. Thus, Benedict says, we are prompted spontaneously also to think of the sacrament of reconciliation, the sacrament of penance, which in the deepest sense of the word is a sacrament of healing. The real wound in the soul, in fact, the reason for all our injuries, all our other injuries, is sin. And only if forgiveness exists by virtue of God's power, by virtue of Christ's love, can we be healed. This was a reflection today from the one, the only Pope Benedict XVI. Of course, he passed away in 2022 and reigned as Pope from 2005 until 2013. I don't know about you, but I could just read this over and over again. Because with each archangel, he looks at them and then talks to us about what they represent. Now, especially in the beginning here, where he talks about God disappearing. And don't we see this in our world? I always think of the word ego as an acronym, easing God out. Listen to this again. The serpent's continuous effort is to make men believe that God must disappear, so that they themselves may become important, that God impedes our freedom, and therefore we must rid ourselves of him. You know, last week we did an interview with Bishop Thomas of the Diocese of Toledo, and he has an incredible document, a incredible new letter out regarding gender ideology. And this is exactly what this issue does. This issue of gender ideology, which leads and is connected to abortion, and which is connected to end-of-life issues as well. And sometimes not even end-of-life issues, right? Sometimes it's just about, well, we're going to eliminate someone or give them the quote-unquote choice to eliminate themselves because we make the decisions. We're God and he's not, when it should be just the opposite. He's God and we are not. There is a God and it's not us. But I would really encourage you to look this up. If you don't have a Magnificat, you can subscribe to it online. It's well worth it. But you can also look up online and Google it, Pope Benedict XVI on the Archangels, and I'm sure it'll come up. But some very poignant points in this reflection about the angels, what they represent and how they can help us in life. And Gabriel, the messenger of God's incarnation, knocking at Mary's door, and through him, God himself asked Mary for her yes to the proposal to become the mother of the Redeemer, knocking at the door of the human heart. And then he is going to that beautiful verse in Revelation where Jesus tells us, I stand at the door and knock. If you open it, I will come in and I will dine with you. See, this is the Lord talking to us through, obviously, the chair of Peter, the late Pope Benedict XVI, through Scripture, and through the archangels. God is there knocking. He's there for us. We just have to be willing to accept him and to remember, as the angels remind us, St. Michael, St. Gabriel, and St. Raphael, that there is a God, and it sure isn't us. And that's a very good thing. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a great day. So interested in this topic. It's something that is near and dear to my heart, having cared for my mom as she was struggling with various illnesses and passed away back in 2020 already. Lisa Livezey is a freelance writer and spiritual blogger. She holds a BA in journalism and receives continuing education from the School of Hard Knocks, don't we all? I love that description. Her writings reflect spiritual insights gathered like wildflowers along life's winding roads. You can tell she's a writer. She seeks to comfort wounded hearts and encourage those laboring in the daily trenches of life, and she contributes to many great publications, including our own National Catholic Register. This morning we're going to be talking about Minding Mom, a caregiver's devotional story. And Lisa, thanks for writing this book, and thanks for being here with us. Everybody can relate to this topic, or if they don't relate to it now, sooner or later they will. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Teresa.
All right, so what led you to put down your own experience in a book?
Well, like you said, as a writer, we tend to write down our experiences, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like I had really extraordinary and ordinary things to talk about. And I know there's so many people dealing with it as caregivers. And after I was finished that season of caregiving, I had started to contribute to a caregiver's devotional. But caregiving devotionals tend to just have like standalone pieces. And I felt like I had a start to finish story to tell. And so I wanted readers to be people who are in the throes of caregiving to be able to hear this and hear my start to finish story, how God met me in the mundane and how God provided in miraculous ways as well. And I just thought maybe it would encourage someone who's out there who's struggling in the day-to-day.
And so you would encourage people to get this book and really maybe read this through the process of caregiving? Is that the idea behind it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a pretty quick read, my book. Many times people read it through once just in entirety because they want to find out what happens at the end. And then they'll go back and they'll read one of the devotions each day. It's divided into 5 seasons. My dad passed away very suddenly in the fall. And so the first part of the book's called Unexpected Fall, then Weathering Winter, then Eternal Spring, Summer Days, DAZE, and the final season. And so within each one of those parts of the book, there's specific devotions that just cover what I was going through because, it's a process. In the beginning, everything's chaotic. And then, you're just trying to hang in there. And then sometimes you feel like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. And so it goes through all of those different stages, which I think most caregivers are dealing with.
Yeah. And it is a discernment process, and it is a labor of love, and I mean that both figuratively and literally.
Absolutely.
Because it's a labor of love because you want the best, and you want to
Yes.
make sure you're doing what's right for them in terms of their needs. But the other thing is you have to figure this all out, and it's not an easy decision. These are things that you may be making decisions on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And it's not going to be perfect, but just as we seek God in all of it, He helps us. I mean, I think of caregiving as being like a wilderness, and we think, what happened when the Israelites were in the wilderness? Well, God led them every day by a pillar of cloud and every night by a pillar of fire. So He did go before them, and I saw God go before me in this process. And then God gave them manna every day, but just for that day. And so I think it can be very helpful to remember, I just have today, I'm going to do my best and making my decisions, but I think we can really get ahead of ourselves when we try to think about, what am I going to do? How long can I do this? What's next year? On the other hand, we have to be making decisions about that as well.
So the book has terrific ratings on Amazon, and it's been out since November, so it's been out for a little while. What's been the response? I'm sure you've heard from people about what it's meant to them, it means to them.
Well, I think it's just something where people feel heard, because being in the caregiving trenches is kind of an invisible, silent place many times. And you feel like everybody else is going on their merry life, especially on weekends and holidays. And you can't because, your loved one needs care. And so I've gotten wonderful responses from people. Every caregiver should read this book. This helped me get through the day. Some people have described it as gritty because I do talk about some of the realities. I mean, with caregiving, we're dealing with activities of daily living, all those things that we all can do all the time, but suddenly our loved one can't. And so we're helping them with those things like, bathing, dressing, using the bathroom, shopping, you have to eat your meals. Who's going to do the grocery shopping? Who's going to make the list? Who's going to put the groceries away? There's so many things to do. In my case, my mom was very, very mobile. So sometimes you're dealing with issues of just not being able to get around. But my mom was extremely mobile. So I was dealing with, how can I keep her busy every day? And it was a bit wild sometimes. I mean, there was one time I was chasing her through neighborhood backyards because she had told her aide that she wanted to walk over to my house alone. And so the aide got in the car and was, driving after her. And I was in the sandwich. I'm like a sandwich generation, if you've heard that term. Like, I still had kids at home. I had a fourth grader and an 11th grader. And so I had just dropped off my fourth grader at a homeschool class. I homeschool my kids. And I get this call from the aide, like, I can't find your mom. So I go racing over, park outside of this house where she said, and we're walking in the backyard calling my mom's name. And I can't find her. And then I thought, maybe she's inside the house. Like, maybe she knocked. So I go around to the front and I knock at the front door. It's 1:00 on a Friday afternoon. And this older guy comes to the door with big glasses, and he opens the door, and I just said, "Is my mother in there?" And then he just kind of looks at me like, "Lady, you're crazy." And he has this smirk on his face. And I all of a sudden realized how ridiculous I must look. So I explained to him real quickly what was going on. And then he came out and started helping us look. And all of a sudden, I noticed there was this little indentation in the bushes. And I thought, maybe she went through there. So I pushed through, and I'm calling her name. And here she heard me, and she said, "Lisa," and she was in the corner of the next backyard. And when she heard my name, she started to cry. And I just felt so bad for her. So pretty soon we were back home, having a cup of tea in her kitchen. But you have these, you have these unexpected things that happen that you're just, and that's when we're crying to God just in the moment, like, "Lord, help me. I don't know what I'm doing. Show me what to do next,"
And so you were being basically a mom to your mom, and then a mom to your children as well.
Yeah, it's true. But then I also had some adult children, and they were so beautifully helping in the process. It was so wonderful to see how the family came together. My oldest son was 24, and he was living at home and working full time, but he offered to stay at my mom's house. So a 24-year-old guy from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. every single day, he stayed on site to monitor her. And sometimes she slept through the night, and sometimes she didn't. And but he was like, have you heard of that devotion, the Sleeping Joseph devotion?
Yeah.
He was Sleeping Joseph that year. He was the Sleeping Joseph to my mom, but he also was to me, because I only lived a mile away. But I knew when I was sleeping that night that my son was there, and he was looking after her. And it was so beautiful.
So those are one of those moments where God was working through your son, and God gave you that little smile and that little hug.
Absolutely.
Right?
And God did that with so many people, friends, some family members. There was just, I really saw his provision. And I would love for caregivers out there that are listening to look for his provision and see that. But then also we can take comfort from Mother Teresa's experience, because she would say, "Do small things with great love." And that's what we're doing with hands-on. But then she also had dark night of the soul, where there were some days where she didn't necessarily know God was there. But we can always take comfort that he's meeting us in that moment. I mean, I think about what happened at the Last Supper. What did Jesus do first? He washed the disciples' feet. So that's what we're doing every day as caregivers. It's a corporal work of mercy. We're caring for the sick. And so I think it's really important that we always realize, we're in the will of God in what we're doing and caring for our loved one.
Beautifully said. More with Lisa Livezey when we come back. The book is Minding Mom, a Care Devotional Story. We'll tell you how to get the book. Again, the title, Minding Mom, a Caregiver's Devotional Story. She's also sharing this, of course, on At Home with Jim and Joy Pinto. We'll be right back. Wow, is this a timely, evergreen topic that we all need to look at some point? Whether you're minding mom or minding dad, or maybe minding a brother or a spouse or a child, this is a beautiful book, Minding Mom, a Caregiver's Devotional Story. And our guest is Lisa Livezey, and she's also sharing this on Jim and Joy Pinto's At Home with Jim and Joy, so you need to check that out as well. Lisa, this is such an important book and so helpful, and I love the fact that you give devotions, 52 devotions for the caregiver. We were chatting during the break, and I know that eventually said your mom, because of her situation with her mental capacity diminishing because of Alzheimer's, eventually you had to get full-time care for her in a facility. Now, my mom did not have any mental issues, except that she was really stubborn. As a stubborn Italian, 100% Italian. And she eventually did have to go to assisted living because it was a physical situation with her. She had severe arthritis and all kinds of medical problems associated with that. But at one point, she was very stubborn and wasn't going to leave, but then she realized she couldn't do it anymore. And then once we found a place for her And she was involved in that decision. And actually, her best friend moved in nearby as well, across the hall. And my mom was always a very social person. I write about this in my book, Everything's Coming Up Rosy. But what a decision it is, though, to really, because you kind of feel guilty, like, oh, I should be able to do this all myself. What's wrong with me, right?
I know, we really do think that. But we have to remember that we're adding it to our already full life. And we already have a full life going. And then the caregiving season comes into it. And I actually did not end up putting my mom into a home. I had the paperwork on my desk, deciding that that's what I was going to need to do because I felt like it was taking too much of a toll on me and my family. And that's actually part of the beauty, why I wanted to share this story, because I had said I'd said to God, I want to keep her at home, but I don't feel like it's going to be the best thing I can do for my family long term. So I'll keep her there for a year, and after a year I'll place her, because at least I can say I did it for a year. And Mom passed away 365 days after my father. And so it was a beautiful gift from God for her and for me. But I certainly understand that challenge of trying to decide what should I do. And one of the ways I ended up putting my mom on hospice was that whole process of I'd taken her to an assisted living place and was trying to see if this would be a good place for her. And the person who evaluated her felt like maybe she was just a little too needy for assisted living, but they didn't have room in their memory care unit. And she said to me, "Have you considered hospice?" I'm like, "Hospice? My mom can run circles around me." But but with dementia, it can be a little bit different with hospice. So I took Mom home, and 2 days later she was on hospice, which just meant that I had the help of a nurse manager and an aide coming in. And so she didn't have the physical needs as much, but it was really a huge help for me with just someone that I could, someone in the medical field that I just had access to that could really help me with decision making.
Yeah, and I think everybody has to decide what's best for them. And if you can have a conversation with your loved one, if they're able to do that, like with my mom, she really sat down and said, "Okay, I can't take care of this house anymore," even though we had help for her, and it was the same thing. We had someone coming in, we had someone taking her to get her hair done and get the groceries and whatnot. But if you add that up, and I'm sure you looked into that and probably used some of those services, that adds up over a while and can be as much money if you have them every day as it would be to put them in an assisted living facility.
Right, and then if they're in their own home, you have all the bills of the home as well.
Right.
So, but this is what I think makes it so challenging, because you're dealing with the daily activities, but you're also dealing with a lot of bigger decisions. My parents, thankfully, had their paperwork in place, so they had healthcare power of attorneys and living wills, and that is a real gift that anyone can have prepared for their child, because I did refer to those as things went on longer. I mean, nowadays with antibiotics and with modern medicine, people are kept alive a lot longer, and so I think we're put in the position where we need to make decisions on their behalf more often than might have happened years back.
I think it's really important that you point out, because sometimes, and you and I know this well, when you're in the midst of making these decisions and caring for a loved one, sometimes you can forget to look up and realize that God's there for you. You mentioned the beautiful story of how your son helped. I know that in my case, unfortunately, I did not get support from my one living sibling until the very end, about a week before my mom died. I'm not going to go into that. There's no need for that. But I did get great support. My husband was and still is amazing, because I always teased him that I think my mom loved him more than she loved me, because he's, Saint Dominic, she used to call him. But also, my friends were really helpful. They would go, and I travel a lot, obviously, I'm sure you do too, for speaking and whatnot, and for our work. And my husband and I would often travel together for speaking events on marriage and for deacon couples, and then leading pilgrimages. And my friends would say, "No problem, let us know when you're going to be gone. We'll go see your mom. We'll take her out to lunch." And you think about that, and it was just such a gift, and they were so sweet, and they would sit there, even if she didn't feel like going out for the day, they'd bring her a little gift or a little treat, they'd sit there for hours and talk, and that made me feel so comforted when I couldn't be there. It
really does. And even if someone has dementia, even the friends visiting makes a difference. You think, oh, the person's not going to know the difference. But, I found that with dementia, they still have that inner emotional core. And my mom knew it was someone that she loved that was there visiting her. And it helps break up the days. And then, my sister, she lived a couple thousand miles away, so she really wasn't able to help on a full-time basis in any way. But she did come in twice at very key times. After my father passed away suddenly, she took 3 weeks of her vacation time from work. And she stayed with Mom. And there is so much to do after somebody passes away. So much paperwork, so many phone calls to make. It's a full-time job for a month at least, just to deal with all those details. And then she came back again at the holidays. She took the Family Medical Leave Act and worked that out with her place of work so that she was able to be there for a few weeks. So even just not having to hit the ground running every single day at 7 a.m., and I also had wonderful friends that were very helpful. And some of those were my friends or friends of my parents were able to come in and be some of the primary caregivers.
Yeah. It's beautiful. We're talking with author, speaker, and writer. Of course, she's a contributor to the National Catholic Register as well. Lisa Livezey, her beautiful book, Mighty Mom, a Caregiver's Devotional Story, came out late last year, but is doing extremely well and getting great reviews because it's a topic to which all of us can relate or will be able to relate, even if not going through caring for a loved one right now. You have to have a sense of humor through all of this, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just funny. Funny things happen. They just do. One time it was winter and it had only been a couple of months after Dad died. And I was at Mom's house. I just put her to bed and it's getting cold. And I'm like, I've turned up the heat. The heat's not coming on. I'm like, oh, no. So I go to the kitchen drawer and I open up the book and I find, the oil company, whatever, in my dad's cursive handwriting, and I call them. And so a technician comes to the door and he said, do you know where the oil tank is? And I'm like, I'm in the house I grew up in and I have no idea where the oil tank is. He said, what about the crawl space? I'm like, oh no, the crawl space. That was my mom's nemesis. My dad was like this frugal, creative engineer, and he stashed everything in the crawl space. His trash pick treasures or leftover things from home improvement projects. So I take the man downstairs to the crawl space. The doors are 3 feet high. I open them and let's just say the man, a wonderful gentleman, but he wasn't young and he wasn't thin. And I watched him bend over 90 degrees and like shuffle down this murky, like dusty crawl space to the very far end. And there's the oil tank. And he does something, and then he comes shuffling back out and gets out and kind of straightens himself up, disgruntled, and goes in the next room. And pretty soon, blessed heat was pouring through the vents of Mom's house. But you have to laugh, and I'm just like, and then I'm praying, like, God, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. and that's the beauty, too, of just the prayers, of just there's so many ways that we can pray. And as Catholics, there's so many beautiful prayers. But I think of prayer as being like the silver and gold threads through the tapestry of life. And when we're caregiving, a lot of times we're doing those just impromptu. Please help me, Lord. Help me in this moment. I don't know what to do next. Or then we have beautiful, if you have time, I can tell you about an Adoration Chapel moment that I had.
Sure, go ahead. Sure, beautiful.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed as a becoming Catholic was learning about Adoration Chapels. I'd never known about that before. And there was one particular chapel I would frequent. And before my father passed away, I would notice this older woman always sitting there. And I think, boy, she is so holy. She's always here praying when I'm here. So it was the week before my dad went into the hospital, and I'm sitting in the Adoration Chapel, and it was just the two of us in there. And she gets up and she comes over to me and hands me some papers and said, I feel like you're supposed to have these. And I looked down, and it's called the Novena of Surrender to the Will of God.
Wow.
And it's a novena, and I'd never heard of it before. And I thought, I feel so good. She thought of me and she gave me this novena. So this is Thursday. So I start praying it, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, my life changed radically because Dad went into the hospital and he passed away, the next Sunday. So I forgot all about the novena of surrender to the will of God, and I stopped doing it. And then about a month later, I came across those papers, and I realized that the Holy Spirit had put that in that woman's mind to come over to me and give me that. And, at the end of each of those prayers, it says, oh, Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything. Yeah. And you repeat that. And so I just made that a perpetual novena that whole entire year. It was a really wonderful moment of just knowing that's one of the ways God showed me. Like he went before me,
That's powerful. And don't you find that it's a very humbling experience?
Absolutely. Caregiving is so humbling. I mean, these day-to-day, these tender moments, though, and I found that it was actually one of the unexpected blessings for me was just this beautiful sweetness that came into my relationship with my mom. She had wanted to be closer than we were, especially in later years, but I had 5 kids. I was homeschooling. I was busy. But by going over every day and spending that time with her, and I would help her with her shower, and then I would make her breakfast, and I'd blow dry her hair, and it was a really sweet time, and I felt like we just had this sweetness come into our relationship that she had really desired and I needed, And so I look back at that as a gift. And I also think about that in relation to things like euthanasia. Like, what if she had just decided, I'm not going to do this?
You wouldn't have had any of that.
Exactly.
Right?
And as hard as it was, I treasure those days with her now.
Yeah. It's interesting because it really, my relationship with my mom was really healed, I think, too, in our caring for her, because we had an okay relationship, but I was very, very close to my father, closer to my father than I was my mother. And my father died, well, it was sort of suddenly. He did have Parkinson's and he had heart issues, but we didn't expect him to go quickly. We thought he would be around for a while. The doctor said he could live a long time.
Same
and
thing.
And he died suddenly.
Same thing.
And then I had to take care of, then the whole thing with my mom's care started to kick in, right? And I remember saying to my husband and to God, like, it would have been so easy with my dad because we got along so well. But the process of that it really enabled me to see my mom and look at her life through her eyes. And just a funny story, though, you talk about the humbling part. Like, I would rush over. Once she was in assisted living, I always wanted to make sure everything was going okay, especially when she was first there. So I'd rush over after the show, and she was about 20 minutes from my house. I'd just get off the air, get in the car, go see her. Still thinking about the show and having to schedule, and then being a wife and everything, and other responsibilities.
Absolutely. It's so much.
And I'd walk in the door, and you'll love this. I'd walk in the door, and she'd look at me. My mother was from New Jersey, never lost her accent, even though we were raised in Michigan. She looks at me, she looks at the door, and says, "Where's your husband?" So I'm like, okay, what am I, chopped liver? I raced over here. I just got off the air doing a 2-hour show. Where's your husband? Like, I'm chopped liver. I don't matter. But
so funny.
That was very humbling. But through that whole process, I was able to spend a lot of time with her and get to know her and think about her life. And that's what I wrote in my book, Everything's Coming Up Rosy, a lot about what she had taught me, even though I didn't realize it at the time. God bless you for doing this book. This is great. You going to do any follow-up, or do you think this is one book on caregiving is enough? What do you think?
Well, I'm a devotional writer, so I kind of write about, what's happening in my life, what I'm going through. So maybe if I go through another caregiving season, caregiving seasons do come and go, don't they?
Yeah,
they do come to an end, and we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, and we know that by God's grace we can fear no evil because he's with us in that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being so real about this, though. That's what matters.
You.
Not like, you see yourself as a superhuman and everything was fine, everything was perfect. No, it's a very difficult thing. It's a beautiful thing, but it's challenging, and we need help. We need God's help and the church's help to go through this.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you. The book is Minding Mom, a caregiver's devotional story. How do we get it?
I think through through EWTN, you can get it. You can also get it on Amazon, and the publisher is En Route Books and Media.
All right, my dear. God bless you, and great work, and look forward to having you on again.
God bless you, too.
And it is a Monday. As we wrap up, we'll tell you what's coming up at the next show tomorrow on a Tuesday. Stay tuned. You enjoyed that interview with Lisa today. I really did. It brought me back. And my mom passed away St. Joseph's Day 2020, March 19th. And it's so interesting what God gives you if you're open to seeing what the Lord will do in your life and in your relationship when you're involved closely with someone and their care. Because I'll tell you what, it's a humbling experience. It's an eye-opening experience. And it really forced me and my mom to work out a lot of our issues, even though we didn't have conversations about, well, we have this issue and this issue. Being together and being in that process together, it really kind of put things in perspective for both of us. In my book, Everything's Coming Up Rosy, it really forced me to really appreciate my mom and everything that she did teach to me over the years. The subtitle of that book is 10 Things I've Learned About Living, 10 Things My Feisty Italian-American Mother Taught Me About Living a Godly Life. And she really did, even though for a long time we did have our own issues. And again, as I was telling Lisa, I was very, very, very close to my father. So God does that. He forces us to kind of reconcile these things. And we think it's a burden and it ends up being a blessing. So just keep that in mind if you're dealing with that right now. And get a copy of Lisa's book. I really would recommend it. All right. Coming up tomorrow, looking forward to chatting with Steve Ray as we move into the month of the Rosary, which is October. Steve is going to lead us again in part number 2 of a series we're doing with Steve, all about the unknown sorrows of Mary, from Scripture and church tradition. So that's tomorrow. And of course, we'll also have the news for you and the latest on the storms that are moving through. Have a great Monday. God willing, on Domani. Talk to you tomorrow.